everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Welcome to another true crime video. This one is like totally could be a movie plot. It is a very, very wild story, so buckle up and let's get right into it. We are going back to Christmas of 1990. So this is Kay and Rolf Tiede. They were a married couple who owned a beautiful cabin really far out in the middle of nowhere in Oakley, Utah. And they often referred to this as the Tiede Tranquility. This was their family's spot to get away from it all, to relax, to connect with nature. This is where they had family occasions. This is where they were building their memories. This was a very happy place for them to be. And these are their daughters, Lene and Trisha. And this cabin was far away from the road, like over 2 miles away from the regular road. So you had to drive up directly to it on snowmobiles. That's how like out and secluded it was. They parked their cars and then they would snowmobile into the cabin. So it was winter of 1990 and they had decided to actually spend all of Christmas at the cabin. So days leading up to Christmas, days after Christmas, and they'd already gone up there, set it all up, set up their Christmas tree, had presents under the tree. It was 3 days before Christmas and they realized they had some more Christmas shopping to do. It was December 22nd. They went into town, did their Christmas shopping, came back, parked their car, got into their snowmobiles because that's how you had to get to the cabin. And they actually took two separate cars. So there was two different groups of them. The first group being Lene, her grandma, and her mom. And they got there first, so they arrived back at the cabin first. So there was stuff to bring into the cabin, but Lene's hands were absolutely freezing. She asked if she could just run inside, warm up her hands, and then come back and help bring stuff in. Her mom said yes, so Lene went into the cabin having no idea what she was about to walk in on. When she got up the stairs, she said she saw like a flash, like a gray figure out of the corner of her eyes go behind the fridge, and she actually thought it was one of her cousins that was there early for, you know, the Christmas celebration, and that he or her was gonna, you know, jump out and surprise her. However, she was clearly wrong. A man in a gray sweatshirt and frizzy hair jumped out and pointed a gun directly at her. Now, at age 16, can you imagine how scared you'd be? And when her mom came in, a man with thick Coke bottle glasses was pointing a gun directly at her.
My mom was saying to him, "What is it you want? Why are you here? I'll give you anything."
But only seconds after that, the man shot Kay and she fell to the ground. And then right after that, he pointed his gun at Lene's grandmother and shot her in the head. And this was incredibly traumatic for Lene.
I saw my mom go down. I turned at that point and looked over my shoulder to my grams and saw her get shot in the head.
She talked about how, you know, devastating this was to see all of this in front of you happen to your mom and your grandmother. And she instantly was just shook with fear because she realized that her dad and her sister were on snowmobiles on their way back to the cabin and they would be arriving any minute. But the man in the gray sweatshirt grabbed Lene and put the gun to her back, and so she had no choice but to just stay there and wait. As Lene's sister Trish and her dad pulled up to the garage, a man popped out in a ski mask and holding a gun.
My dad could see tears in my eyes, and it was an unspoken communication, and he knew at that point that something awful had happened to Mom.
And asked if they had any money. Instantly, Rolf dropped everything, grabbed everything that was in his pocket and started to like just pouring it out onto the ground like, dude, take anything you want. And that is absolutely what you do. Unfortunately, in this case, they were so evil that they didn't care and they decided that they were gonna shoot him anyway. In fact, the man with the Coke bottle glasses was told to shoot Lene's dad right there. He actually held the hammer back but refused to fire the rifle. And so the other guy who was tying up Lene at the time stopped what he was doing and held the gun up to their dad and listened to the girls explain how this happened.
So then the other man restraining my sister pulled his gun out, pointed it at my dad, pulled the trigger. Once, click, no fire. Twice, click, no fire. Third one when it off, that blast was so close I could feel it.
I had no doubt in my mind that he was dead.
I cannot imagine the evil that you would have to kill someone in front of their children. Now, what was weird about this whole thing is these guys had been in their cabin. They like made themselves at home. They were eating things, food was everywhere, all of their Christmas presents were opened. So it showed them that they weren't, you know, afraid of getting caught. They were waiting for them to come home. They wanted them to come home. I guess to destroy their evidence, since they had left evidence everywhere, their plan was to burn down the whole cabin. So the Tiedes had these gas cans at the cabin. They always had them there, and they were to fill up the snowmobiles. So these two men grabbed the gas cans and started pouring it all over the house. So I bet you have a feeling where this is going. They decided to set the house on fire, burn it to the ground, get rid of their evidence, and they ordered the girls to start packing up all the stuff they took onto the snowmobiles and then take them out of there, basically. So these poor girls have just seen their grandmother and their mother get shot, their father get shot, and then they are told to take their killers on snowmobiles out away from the only place that they know is secure, which is no longer secure anymore. And they have no one. They have no one knows this is going on. So they were actually headed up to the main entrance of this community, and that's when they saw their uncle. This is their uncle, Randy Zorn, and he thought that the two men were their boyfriends. So he actually tried to walk up to them, and they acted super, super weird. The girls completely ignored him, didn't even make eye contact or acknowledge him, definitely didn't act like they knew him. And they were doing that because they were smart. These girls were very smart and resourceful, especially under the pressure they were in. But they ignored Randy. They acted like they didn't know him because they knew that if they acted like they knew him or he was their family, then they would shoot him as well. Randy thought this was strange, but just whatever, figured it was teenage bullshit. So they kept going, and they got to the car, they loaded their guns into the car, and one of them looked over to the girls and showed them that he had a knife and said, "Don't worry, I'm just as good with a knife as I am with a gun." So basically threatening them, don't make any moves. If you've been watching my channel for a while or other true crime stuff, you know the time after someone is abducted is crucial. Time is of the essence. So their uncle Randy actually saw them again in their car, and he was waving them down, trying to get them to stop. And the girls completely ignored him again. Thank God they didn't try to, motion towards him or anything. Who knows what could have happened. But that's when Randy figured something's definitely wrong. That is unusual for them. Then less than a minute later, Randy saw someone coming up on the snowmobile, and this person wasn't wearing a coat, no helmet, no gloves, and he was bleeding. This man's face was swollen and his eyes were swollen closed.
And I go, wow, who is this? And I look and I go, oh my God, it's my brother, Rolf. And his face is just huge and full blood and just big. His eyes swelled shut, blood sickles, because it was cold. He was in really bad shape.
Just frantically talking about how someone had shot him, his wife had been killed, and his kids had been kidnapped. So obviously Randy started to panic. I mean, he's dealing with his brother who's shot in the face, but is alive, which is good. I wasn't sure when I first heard the story if he was going to live through that, but amazing that he did. But he has him, he clearly needs medical attention immediately. And then he's got his nieces who are kidnapped, and he's chasing after them. So picture what this dude is dealing with. His brother's laying in the backseat bleeding, screaming about how his kids are kidnapped, and he is literally chasing the kidnappers with his nieces in the car. He started heading down the canyon in his car as fast as he could, and this was, in the 90s. The cell phone service was shitty already, plus it was even worse because they were in the mountains. It took him multiple tries, and honestly I'm surprised he even got through at all, but he finally did get through to 911. He explained to the police what had happened, where the girls were, what car they were in, where they were headed, and that he needed a helicopter for his brother immediately. But right at that moment, his cell phone died. So he actually ended up pulling into a gas station and calling 911 from a payphone. Meanwhile, in the car, the girls were freaked out but trying to stay calm. But that's when they noticed a police car pass them, stop, turn around, and follow them. So obviously that was a huge sense of relief for them. The two men that were kidnapping them started panicking, obviously. They ended up turning right towards the canyon and then drove about another mile before the car fell off of an embankment.
I remember looking up because the car was at an angle and noticing the entire road above us we came down was full of maybe a couple cops, but mostly people in common clothes, drawn down with pistols and shotguns and rifles at us.
And there was cops pointing guns at me, and my little sister says, no, that's my sister. And I don't think they'd received information that there was even hostages in the car.
I reached back for my sister's hand and grabbed her hand and said, duck.
And we both ducked, and we were praying and just squeezing each other's hand.
And the arrest process wasn't too difficult. The suspects were arrested at the scene, at the car.
As long as they were in total control of a situation by use of fear and force, then they continued to function. When that control went away, That's when it stopped, and they surrendered to authorities.
Shortly after that, the helicopter finally showed up and took Rolf to the hospital, who was clearly in critical condition. And it's really crazy that he survived, because later on they found out that he had also been doused with gas and partially set on fire at one point. He ran into his cabin, tried to take his snow vest off, and got in the shower and put out the fire. So obviously deputies needed to go back to the house and survey the scene and see what had happened. And listen to how police described the scene when they got back to the house.
I picked up a faint smell. It was kind of like burnt hair and maybe burnt fabric. As I entered the garage, there was a 12 to 18 inch puddle of blood that was fresh. As I started up the stairwell, I could see holes in the wall, bullet holes coming from one wall across the stairwell into the other wall. I actually walked into the smoke before I really realized that the top floor of that cabin was on fire. Then our mindset went to protecting the victim's property. On top of the coffee table, there was a VCR camera and some tapes.
One of the most interesting pieces of evidence they found in the house was a video camera that actually had a tape in it, and it was recorded by the killers.
How come you got a light flashing on over that? I don't know. Find out.
They were opening the family's Christmas presents.
Oh, wow. What is it? Baseball card.
I remember thinking of the pure malice and hate that these men must have.
And my man.
What heartless jerks.
So who are these two men? They were in their early to mid 20s. The first one being Vaughn Taylor, who had previously been convicted of aggravated burglary. And then there was Edward Deli, who had been previously convicted of arson, which is setting things on fire. They both had recently been released from prison and sent to a halfway house, and they were able to leave this halfway house and go out and look for jobs. The two of them were literally hitchhiking around the area, and one of them knew someone who owned a cabin in the same area, so they randomly targeted the Tiede's family cabin. They'd actually robbed several other cabins before this, but they waited at theirs because they knew the family was there and would be coming home. What they really needed was a car to get out of there, so that was their main objective about robbing them specifically. Now this probably seems like a slam dunk case, really simple. They came in and killed these people, they clearly did it, whatever, move on, put them in jail, punish them. But it actually was really complicated. They had to figure out their roles in it, each of their roles, who shot who, how did everything go down. By the end, there was a total of at least 8 felonies against these men. This included murder, aggravated kidnapping, arson, and the high-speed chase. And the family was going for the death penalty. They were pissed, and rightfully so. It was so evil. It was so unnecessary and selfish for these men to do what they did. 5 months after the crime, Vaughn Taylor pleaded guilty to 2 counts of capital murder. And the state actually dropped all other charges on him in exchange for the plea. And Taylor actually decided to go in front of a jury instead of just a judge. And after going to trial, doing the full trial, the jury actually found him guilty of both counts of murder and sentenced him to the death penalty, not only once but twice. So essentially he had 2 death sentences. A few weeks after Taylor's, it was time for Deli's trial. And what's crazy is that Rolf Tiede came to court. And Deli seemed to have no idea that he had survived. He had to face the man that he had shot in his face, into his eyes. The only reason he survived is because the killers actually used the wrong gun when they shot him. They were using a bird shot, which I guess is the smallest size. I'm so bad with guns, but even with the smaller gun, his odds of surviving that were still 1 in 1,000, but it definitely helped that they used the wrong type of gun. I think it was extremely gratifying for Rolf to be able to speak in court, say what he needed to say, face him. And after Deli's trial, he was actually charged with the murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Because he was sentenced for 2nd-degree murder, the death penalty had to be taken completely off the table. He would have gotten 1st-degree murder, but one of the jury members was set on being 2nd, so they held out, and so he didn't end up getting the death penalty. In 2001, Deli wrote a letter to Lene, and eventually Lene responded to him. And it took her a really, really long time, years I believe, but when she finally did, she was able to forgive him in a way.
Deli has shared with me that he has grown into a man, not the same evil boy that committed the crime. I believe that I gained my freedom back for myself by choosing to forgive Deli.
Later on in 2014, Taylor actually tried to appeal his sentence. January 24th, 2014, the Utah Supreme Court rejected his appeal. Basically argued that he didn't get a fair trial because 75% of the jury was Mormon. The Utah Supreme Court has rejected this, so as of right now, he is just sitting on death row. Now you'd think after going through this, the family would have never gone back to that cabin, but they did. They actually decided to take this situation, which they felt like, you know, they took their mother from them, their grandmother from them.
There was a double funeral for my mother and grandmother. My grandmother's name's Beth Tidwell Potts. My mother's name is Kay Tidwell Tiede.
But they didn't want them to be able to take that spot from them. So they ended up redoing the cabin, making it even better than it was before. And Lene and Trish like bring their family and friends up there all the time. They love going there still. It's a place for healing for them. And I can really understand that, you know, in a way, that's the last place that your mother was, that your grandmother was, where their spirit was before they were gone. I feel like that area indeed would be very healing if you changed it and, you know, took it back and made it yours again. So I just thought that was so beautiful that they did that. Sadly though, Rolf was diagnosed with cancer and passed away in 2009. As for the girls, they feel like they have moved on. They enjoy going to their cabin often, and they think that this experience has brought them so much closer together. So my heart goes out to their whole family. I cannot imagine how different Christmas would be forever after this, and just how you would come back from such a traumatic event. I mean, these girls are very, very strong, and I have a lot of respect for them. So anyway, that's it for me today, guys. I hope you enjoyed this story. Let me know what you think below, and I will see you next time.